Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brent Hyden here, coming at you on this Monday morning, talking 11 games around the NBA. Lots of injuries and lots of news to talk about, so we are going to skip the daily reminder about subscriptions and Patreon and all that good stuff and hop right into the slate. The first game we are going to talk about Washington at Indiana. John Wall is listed as questionable for this game, doubtful for this game. Victor Oladipo remains out, and Dwight Howard remains out with his ass surgery. Indiana favored by 6.5 in this one, 214.5 over under. A couple news and notes looking at a few of these guys. Corey Joseph shooting 53.7% from the floor over his last 5 games. That's really the only streak or anything like that. We're noting Washington has won 5 of the last 6 games in this series. So if you're into sports betting, maybe hitting that line a little bit might be good for you, just based on the history of these two teams. But looking at the Washington side of things first, with Wall being doubtful for this game, obviously. Bradley Beal comes into play. He owns a 31% usage rate and 1.2 fantasy points per minute without John Wall on the floor. Obviously, not huge boosts over what he already averages on the season. And it's obviously not a very good matchup for him, but Bradley Beal is someone that we absolutely have to consider tonight, coming in at 8,400 on DraftKings, 8,700 on FanDuel, dropped 58 against Atlanta the last time John Wall sat out. Just going to take a ton of shots. I mean, he has over 20 field goal attempts in the last 3 games, and that's really, really appealing. He's going to play a lot of minutes. If he gets hot from the three-point line, which is definitely a possibility against a Indiana team that's allowing opponents to shoot 37% from three, he could definitely have a really, really good game. So I would definitely recommend using Bradley Beal as a core option in your lineups tonight, especially in cash games. I do think fading him in tournaments is perfectly fine because there is a path to him not having a huge game here, given that Washington could definitely get blown out in this spot tonight. Some other spots that I really, really like here. Tomas Satoransky has already been starting, is not going to get thrust into, a ton more minutes because of John Wall being out. He did play 38 last game against Atlanta. I would project him right around 34. I don't see him getting over that 38 mark, but he is perfectly fine in all formats. Only a 14% usage rate with John Wall off the floor this season, but 0.85 fantasy points per minute. Taking a look over at the projections, Satoransky projects to be just a mediocre play, not someone that jumps off the page as a fantastic option, but going to be popular based on how he performed the last time John Wall was out. So he is fine in cash and tournaments if you wish. Austin Rivers would get the starts. He would also be someone that we can definitely look at here. Just had a decent game. It wasn't anything to write home about, but he does average a 20.6% usage rate, 0.72 fantasy points per minute with John Wall off the floor. As I mentioned, a decent game last time John Wall was out with 27 fantasy points, shot really, really, really bad with 3 of 12 from the floor, and also was in foul trouble. So Austin Rivers, someone else that we can look at here. Where I am most likely going to be looking here is going to be Kelly Oubre, especially if he's not in the starting lineup. If they do keep him coming off the bench, 40% of his field goal attempts are 3-pointers. Indiana is allowing small forwards to shoot 42.3% on 3-pointers this season. I absolutely love Kelly Oubre in this spot. He does own a 29.5% usage rate and 1.12 fantasy points per minute whenever you take John Wall off the floor. Kelly Oubre, someone to definitely consider, and if you look at the projections, does project to be a decently good cash option here tonight, but he does have upside, so I do have some interest in him. And then Otto Porter, someone that I really, really like here, 6,100 on DraftKings, 7K on FanDuel. He also does get a little bit of a boost, 1.06 fantasy points per minute with John Wall off the floor. Really, really good spot for him. And then Markieff Morris and Jeff Green, a couple of names that you can also consider in this spot tonight. With Oladipo out for Indiana, we obviously have some places to look as well on the Indiana side of this game in a very, very very good matchup. Tyreek Evans, 27% usage rate, 1 fantasy point per minute. Domantas Sabonis, 25.3% usage rate, 1.44 fantasy points per minute. We also have Bojan Bogdanovic, who has been really, really good of late with a 23% usage rate. Bogdanovic is someone that I do have a lot of interest in, has been playing really, really well. With Oladipo out in this spot, he is very appealing. It is also a revenge game, but averaging a team high 19.1 points on 13 field goal attempts and 53% shooting to go along with his 43.2% shooting from beyond the arc and 3.5 rebounds and 1.9 assists over the last 10 games. Again, really, really solid spot here for him tonight against a Washington defense that is just absolutely terrible. They're giving up 116.7 points per game. So getting some exposure to Indiana, really, really, really good idea. I do like Darren Collison a significant amount as well. Washington, 28th in defensive efficiency to point guards on the season. They're giving up 28.3 points, 6.2 rebounds, 9.7 assists, 45.8% shooting, and 39% from beyond the arc. He has also been really, really solid without Oladipo in 10 games this season, 28.6 fantasy points per game. With a team high 45.8% assist rate over the last 10 games, considering how bad Washington is on defense. 6,900 for Darren Collison is really, really appealing. 6,600 on FanDuel, even more appealing over there. Really good spot here for Collison. Another guy that I would definitely consider building my lineups around tonight. Washington is allowing opponents to shoot 63% at the rim. Tyreek Evans, 24% usage rate over the last 10 games, but he takes a lot of shots at the rim. 48% of his shots come at the rim, with another 35% of his shots coming from three-point range. Again, I mentioned Washington, terrible defense. They're allowing opponents to shoot 37% from three this season. Tyreek Evans in tournaments, I still really, really like him. Has continued to let everybody down, but again, eventually this shooting is going to be there for him. Shooting just 33% from the floor over the last 5 games, 33% from three over the last 5 games. Those numbers are going to come up. Tyreek Evans at 4,700 on DraftKings, 5,300 on FanDuel. A very, very good tournament option here. Looking at the big men, I'm always going to lean towards Sabonis over Miles Turner, just given how productive Sabonis is in the minutes that he plays. Domantas Sabonis coming at 7,300, very, very appealing in this spot against a Washington team. It's giving up almost 49 rebounds per game, 15.3 second chance points, and just can't defend the rim, can't defend really anybody. So Domantas Sabonis coming in at 7,300 on DraftKings, 7K on FanDuel, projects to be a really, really, really good play tonight. I do like him a significant amount. And then Miles Turner, who has been really solid recently. He does average a 21.9% usage rate and 1.14 fantasy points per minute without Oladipo in that starting lineup. He does have a couple of games over 40 fantasy points. Price is definitely elevated, 7K on DraftKings, 7,200 on FanDuel. He's fine in cash and tournaments. I'm still going to lean towards Sabonis, though. I think the ceiling on Sabonis is much higher, and for a similar price point, that is where I want to go. You can definitely consider Thaddeus Young in cash just because he's going to play a lot of minutes, and it is a very, very good matchup for him tonight. Moving on, taking a look at Detroit at Philly. Oh boy, Philly 7-point favorites in this one, 222 over under. Looking at the Detroit side of things first, we do have lots of injury news to talk about. Ish Smith is out. Reggie Bullock is questionable. Stanley Johnson is questionable. And then on the Philly side, we have Landry Shamet, who is questionable, and Joel Embiid, who is questionable, but most likely is going to play in this one. Despite some rumbling that Joel Embiid a little unhappy with his role, Joel Embiid leads the league in double-doubles with 24 on the season, tops the team with 26.3 points per game since Jimmy Butler, or 26.3 points per game on the season. Jimmy Butler averaging 21.4 on 50% shooting since the trade. Ben Simmons has still really been solid, averaging 15.3, 9 rebounds, and 7.9 assists. So there is a lot to like in this game. Looking at the Detroit side of this first, a lot of it's going to depend on who is actually available for this game. Andre Drummond obviously is fine in tournaments, 8,400 on DraftKings, 9K on FanDuel. I don't really want to use him against Joel Embiid, who like literally owns a 6-bedroom ranch style home inside of Andre Drummond's head. I don't have a lot of interest in taking him. I think there's better places to look. And at that price tag, I would almost rather go with Joel Embiid as like a core option because he is just a few $100s more, and we'll get to that in just a moment. The place that I really, really, really want to attack is Blake Griffin. I've highlighted this multiple times already. He went off last game against Philly, has just destroyed Philly in 3 games this season. Blake Griffin averaging 67 fantasy points per game against them. He dropped 54.5 against them in their last game. Blake Griffin coming in at 9,500 on DraftKings, 9,100 on FanDuel. Very, very appealing there. Griffin owns a team high 29% usage rate. Philly struggling to defend high usage power forwards. They rank 26th in defensive efficiency to the position, giving up 22.8 points, 13.4 rebounds, and 47.6% shooting. Blake Griffin, a fantastic option in all formats. If Stanley and Bullock were to miss this game, Blake Griffin's usage rate goes up to like 33 to 35%. That's very, very, very appealing here. Great way to get exposure to the Detroit side of this game. Looking at the rest of it, again, it's going to depend mostly on Reggie Bullock and Stanley Johnson, but Reggie Jackson would see a usage boost with either one of those guys off the floor, and his minutes have been very, very interesting recently, coming in at 5K on DraftKings, 5,800 on FanDuel. Reggie Jackson, 26 minutes against the Pelicans, but 34 against Philly last time out. Reggie Jackson would be a fantastic cash and tournament option on DraftKings. A good cash option over on FanDuel as well. Since Covington got traded, Philly has actually struggled a bit against point guards, so that gives Reggie Jackson a definite boost. Stanley Johnson would be interesting if he were able to suit up. Unfortunately, we don't know the status of him right now. Reggie Bullock would be interesting if he was able to suit up as like some value options for this game. Langston Galloway would be the guy that I would keep an eye on in the spots. If anybody is ruled out, if Bullock and Stanley Johnson are both out, Langston Galloway would once again play over 30 minutes, coming off 2 really, really solid games where he's just shot the ball a ton. 15 field goal attempts against Philly last time out, 20 against New Orleans last night or yesterday afternoon. Would be a very, very, very good value option. But looking at the other side of this game, I mentioned Joel Embiid owns a 6-bedroom ranch-style home inside of Andre Drummond's head. Expect him to play. Missed yesterday with like a migraine, but I definitely expect him to play in the spot. If he doesn't, I would be shocked. He is a lock for me tonight. Like I don't use that lock word very often, but Joel Embiid is a lock for me tonight. He's dropped 64.3 and 65.8 fantasy points in back-to-back games against Andre Drummond. Has topped 30 points in 3 of his 5 total matchups against him. 9,800 on DraftKings is just way too cheap to not look at Joel Embiid in this spot. 10-4 on FanDuel is still way too cheap for the upside he has. He does get a great matchup here against Andre Drummond, as the Pistons have not been good against centers. Despite having, a fantastic rebounder in Andre Drummond, and they're still giving up 50 points in the paint. They're giving up 45 rebounds per game. It's just really, really good spot for Joel Embiid tonight. Looking at the rest of this team, I do have interest in Ben Simmons in tournaments. Almost cash game viable, actually, at 8,500 on DraftKings, 9,200 on FanDuel. Obviously, he did get a little bit of a boost with Joel Embiid being out the last time these teams played. He got 40 minutes, had 52 fantasy points, but given that he takes so many shots at the rim, 70% of his shots come at the rim, Detroit allowing 69% shooting at the rim, very nice. This is just a really, really good spot for Ben Simmons, so I do like him in cash in tournaments. And then Butler, a very, very solid tournament option here tonight. Wilson Chandler can be used as a value option if you wish. And if Embiid does miss this game, that's a huge boost to JJ Redick, Mike Muscala, two guys that would get some boosts in the spot. JJ Redick would actually get a pretty decent usage boost and become a really, really good option. He's still fine in cash in this spot tonight, regardless of Joel Embiid's status, but he would get a significant boost if Embiid were to sit. And then Mike Muscala, who came off the bench last game, went absolutely bonkers, coming in at 4,200, would be another really, really good value option in this spot. Moving on. The next game of the night is going to be New Orleans at Boston. Boston 7-point favorites in this game, 228 over under. Looking at the New Orleans side of this, Etuan Moore is questionable. Anthony Davis does not have an official injury tag, but he did miss some time last game. Yesterday afternoon, dealing with a little bit of a hip injury once again. Definitely something that we want to keep an eye on. Alvin Gentry said they are not going to push the issue if he's feeling pain. They are not going to force him to play in the spot, so definitely something we want to keep an eye on. Aaron Baines and Al Horford are questionable for the Boston side of this game. Looking at a couple of news and other noteworthy things, Holiday made 14 of his 22 shots on Sunday, averaging 26.5 points and 9.5 assists over his last 4 games. Irving dropped 26 points, 10 assists with 5 steals in an earlier win this season at New Orleans. Julius Randle has been in the starting lineup and going absolutely off recently, averaging 29.5 points and 11.3 rebounds over a 4-game span. Looking at this, obviously Anthony Davis is a perfectly fine option. I would reserve him only for GPPs at this point, though, because we don't know how he's going to handle that hip if he even plays in this spot. Jrue Holiday and Julius Randle are perfectly fine options in tournaments in this spot. Holiday fine in cash, regardless of Anthony Davis's status. I would reserve Randle just for GPPs in the spots if we get news that Davis is going to suit up. But if Davis sits, and I'm going to act like I'm actually planning on him sitting, we'll have to wait and see. But I kind of would be shocked if he plays. But Randle, 31.8% usage rate, 1.3 fantasy points per minute. Mirotic, 25.4% usage rate, 1.21 fantasy points per minute. And Jrue Holiday, 26.2% usage rate, 1.16 fantasy points per minute. All 3 of those guys would come into play in this spot if Anthony Davis sits. Obviously, you want to put the priority on getting Julius Randle in your lineup. Mirotic would move back into the starting lineup and he would be fine. I think I would rank them Randle, Holiday, Mirotic in that order for cash and tournaments if Anthony Davis sits. Tim Frazier continues to be a solid value option, coming in at 4,100 on DraftKings, 5,200 on FanDuel. That's going to be a fade, but continues to put up really, really solid assist numbers. Just is consistently getting you, well over, getting you 20 plus fantasy points most nights. So Tim Frazier, a viable value option here. Looking at the Boston side, I mentioned Kyrie Irving went off against this New Orleans team last time they faced off. I have a lot of interest in Kyrie Irving. It's going to be tough for me to not have him in as a core option tonight. New Orleans ranks 26th in defensive efficiency to point guards, giving up 27.7 points, 6.3 rebounds, 8.7 assists, 46.3% shooting, and my notes say 0% from 3, but I do know that is not correct. New Orleans is giving up 40% on 3-point attempts this season. Kyrie attempting 34% of his shots from 3, so gets a pretty big boost. Given that New Orleans can't really defend the 3-point line. Kyrie Irving coming off a bad game against the Bulls where he put up 26 fantasy points in under 23 minutes. Yeah, Kyrie Irving, 8,900 on DraftKings, 8,500 on FanDuel is just way too cheap, I think, for Kyrie Irving in this spot. So I absolutely love him in all formats. Looking at the rest of Boston, obviously the status of Al Horford and Aaron Baines is going to be really, really, really important to monitor. If Baines were to miss and Al Horford were to miss, we would be going back to Daniel Tice. Again, just going to need to monitor the news. I'll update in Discord accordingly. Right now, I'm just going to act like they are both going to play. Al Horford would be perfectly fine in cash and tournaments if he suits up tonight. Would be a good spot for him. I still have a lot of interest in Jaylen Brown, even at 5K price tag. Has been really good over the last couple of games coming off the bench. Played 25 minutes against the Knicks, 28 minutes against the Bulls, a 22.7% usage rate over those last two games. The Pelicans really struggle in transition, giving up 1.22 points per possession. Brown is a guy that runs in transition a decent amount. He is fine in tournaments here. Marcus Smart, a perfectly fine value option in cash, tournaments, wherever you want to use him. Not someone that I have a lot of interest in, though. 12% of Gordon Hayward's field goal attempts are quarter threes. New Orleans is allowing opponents to shoot 43.3% on quarter threes. Gordon Hayward, an interesting cash and tournament option here at 5,700 on DraftKings, 6,100 on FanDuel. Again, coming off a couple of down games, but coming off the bench, still going to split some usage with Jaylen Brown, but I still like Gordon Hayward in the spot. And then Jason Tatum continues to be a guy where he never really jumps off the page, but has been shooting a little bit better recently. And he is fine at 6,900 on DraftKings, 6,800 on FanDuel, in a really, really good spot here. So I have some interest in Jason Tatum in cash and tournaments. Moving on to the Kings at Bulls. Sacramento, 2.5 point favorites, 225 over under in this game. Oh boy, the Bulls. Looking at injury notes, Chris Dunn has been ruled out. Bobby Porter is still questionable for this game. Denzel Valentine is out. No real notes here or anything of note except for Justin Jackson has been really good over the last 5 games, shooting 10 of 16 from 3. Looking at the Sacramento side of things, they should be popular options tonight. I don't know if they're going to be popular options, though. And I think that could be a pretty big mistake. The Bulls giving up 116 points per game, just gave up 133 points to the Celtics. They lost by a lot. 133 to 77 in that game. Some heated moments coming the next day. All kinds of drama going on in Chicago right now. Boylan wants to run them really, really hard in practice. The team had a mutiny and refused to practice and instead held a kumbaya where they told each other how they felt about each other and all this fun stuff. So lots of goodness in Chicago. But looking at the Kings side, De'Aaron Fox should absolutely feast tonight. Chicago ranks 30th in defensive efficiency to point guards. They're giving up 26.2 points, 8.4 rebounds, 8.7 assists, 46% or 47% shooting from the field, and 39% from 3. Taking a look at the projections here, De'Aaron Fox comes in as a really, really, really good option here. 7,600 on DraftKings, 7,700 on FanDuel. 47% of his shots come in the paint or the mid-range. Chicago allowing 42.3% shooting in the paint, 41.7% shooting in the mid-range. He's an excellent option in all formats, again, coming in at 7,600 on DraftKings, 7,700 on FanDuel. Projects to be a really, really solid play. So does Marvin Bagley. So does Buddy Hield. So does Willie Cauley-Stein. So does Bogdan Bogdanovic. Everybody projects to be a really, really good play in the spot against Chicago. I have a ton of interest in everybody. 20% of him on Shumpert's field goal attempts are corner threes. He's probably going to play right around 20 to 24 minutes, I would assume. Maybe a couple extra. He's a fine value play, especially over on FanDuel at 3,900. Buddy Hield should absolutely feast in transition. Chicago allowing 1.22 points per possession in transition. Buddy Hield gets out in transition and scores in transition a significant amount this season. He's completely fine. Bogdan, completely fine in cash. Again, I mentioned Bagley, someone that I have a lot of interest in, has not been great in his first couple of games back from injury, but I do expect him to get upwards of 27, 28 minutes in a very, very, very good matchup at 4,700 on DraftKings. excellent tournament option. 6,200 on FanDuel. Not as good a tournament option, but you can still roll him out. And Willie Cauley-Stein, definitely a tournament center option tonight. Chicago ranks 28th in defensive efficiency. The centers are giving up 49.5 rebounds. But again, more of a tournament option at center tonight at 6,100 on DraftKings, 6,900 on FanDuel. Looking at the Chicago side of this game, one second. Oh, this is going to be interesting. It's kind of tough to trust Chicago in the spot, especially given everything that's happened, but there's definitely some places to look here. Starting with Lauri Markkanen. Through his first 4 games, has averaged 30.8 fantasy points and 26.1 minutes per game, putting up 15.8 points, 6.3 rebounds, shooting just 38% or 38.3% from the floor, but 39.4% from 3-point range. He does have a 27.8% usage rate through those 4 games. Sacramento ranks 24th in defensive efficiency to power forwards on the season, giving up 24.2 points, 10.9 rebounds, and allowing them to shoot 49% from the floor. Lauri Markkanen is a core option for me today at 6,300 on DraftKings, 6,700 on FanDuel. I expect him to eventually start shooting better from the floor as he gets more in rhythm. I just absolutely love him in the spot tonight. Going to be someone that I'm building my lineups around. Zach LaVine, 26% usage rate with Lauri Markkanen back in the lineup. That does hurt his upside, especially at his FanDuel price of 8,100, but at 7,400 on DraftKings, Zach LaVine, someone that I definitely have some interest in tonight as a tournament option, should be able to bounce back from that bad game against Boston. Sacramento ranks 28th in defensive efficiency to shooting guards on the season. They're allowing opponents to shoot 66.2% at the rim, 40.9% in the paint, and 41.7% in the mid-range. 47% of LaVine's shots come at the rim. 28% come in the paint or mid-range. Zach LaVine, a great tournament option. Justin Holiday, a fantastic cash and tournament option. I expect him to play a lot of minutes here tonight. Coming in at 5,300 on DraftKings. He is 5,600 on FanDuel. I absolutely love him in cash and tournaments. Does still have upside even with Lauri Markkanen being back. Really, really good option here. And then Wendell Carter Jr. in tournaments against a Sacramento team that has struggled against big men this season. I like him on DraftKings at 5K in center eligibility. I do not like him on FanDuel at power forward and 6K. Moving on, Cleveland at Milwaukee. Milwaukee 13.5 point favorites in this game. 223 over under. David Nwaba is out. Rodney Hood is questionable, and Della Vedova is questionable. Tristan Thompson has pulled down exactly 19 rebounds in 3 of his 5 December games. Chris Middleton, 20 for 65 from the floor over the last 5 games, so he is struggling a little bit. Most of Cleveland is going to need, we're just going to need to wait a little bit longer on news, but with Hood being out already, with David Nwaba being out already, Hood potentially missing this game. We know the rotations are going to be shortened a little bit. It's not a great spot here for Cleveland tonight. Milwaukee is allowing opponents to shoot 45.5% shooting in the paint, along with 44.5% shooting in the mid-range. Colin Sexton does take 56% of his shots in those zones. If I was forcing exposure to anyone in this spot, it would be Colin Sexton. Projects for a few less fantasy points than Alec Burks, but Colin Sexton, I feel confident in his minutes, has been shooting really well recently. 47.5% from the floor over his last 6 games, 46.7% from 3 over that span. Colin Sexton, a very, very solid option, and as I mentioned, he is a guy that does take a ton of shots in the mid-range and in the paint, where we like to target shooters against Milwaukee. So Colin Sexton, the guy that I do have the most interest in, would be fine in cash and tournaments. Right now, as it stands, with just David Nwaba out, I think Colin Sexton is fine in cash and tournaments. But if Rodney Hood misses as well, that's going to be even better for Colin Sexton. So he's someone that I do have interest in. Burks is price is definitely elevated. Right now, I would reserve him for just tournaments. If Rodney Hood were to miss this game, that would secure his 30 plus minutes, and he would be someone that I would use in cash as well. I do like Chetty Osman starting at the 4 more than starting at the 3. So if he starts at the 4, he is cash viable, especially at just 4,300 on DraftKings. He is 4,700 on FanDuel. You could still use him in cash. He's just a guy that's going to play a lot of minutes, so that's completely fine. I mentioned Thompson pulling down exactly 19 rebounds in 3 of his 5 games this month, averaging 13.6 points and 13 rebounds per game over the past 7. He's fine in cash. Yeah, that's pretty much that's the Cavs. Dellavedova, we'll have to wait and see if he suits up. He should be able to go for this game. It would be a revenge game. I just don't know how many minutes he's going to get in this spot tonight. Looking at the Milwaukee side of this, Giannis is Giannis. Fantastic spot for Giannis, coming in at 11-7 on DraftKings, 12-3 on FanDuel. I like to target him against teams that can't defend the rim, and, well, Cleveland can't defend the rim. They're giving up 69% shooting at the rim. Giannis taking a boatload of shots this season at the rim. 66% of his shots come at the rim. Giannis, excellent option in all formats. Should absolutely eat here. Malcolm Brogdon continues to be a really consistent option. Price is elevated, where I'm a little less intrigued by him. 6,200 on DraftKings, 6,100 on FanDuel. Consistently getting you a decent amount of points, but price is not where exactly I would like it, but he's still fine in cash. Cleveland is allowing opponents to shoot 36.6% on three-point attempts. That's a big boost to Middleton and Brook Lopez. I do like both guys in tournaments tonight, and Bledsoe is perfectly fine in tournaments. We'll have to wait and see if George Hill is going to get in the lineup. Did not make the lineup last night, but could get in there tonight. It would be a revenge game for him as well. Moving on, Utah at Oklahoma City. Not a very appealing game in this spot. Oklahoma City, 5.5 point favorites, 218.5 over under. Russell Westbrook coming off his 109th career triple-double against the Bulls. Has registered 5 triple-doubles in his last 8 games. Donovan Mitchell averaging 26 points over his last 4 road games. Oklahoma City, obviously one of the best defenses in the NBA, but they still do struggle to defend in the paint. They're allowing 42.4% shooting in the paint. That is a little bit of a boost for Donovan Mitchell tonight. 26% of his field goal attempts come in the paint this season. I do actually like him in cash in tournaments. 7K on DraftKings, very appealing. 7,900 on FanDuel, a little less appealing. The rest of Utah, this game is just mostly tournaments for me. Gobert is going to play a lot of minutes. He's completely fine in tournaments going up against Steven Adams. It was nice to see Gobert, who did struggle on the boards a little bit last game, notch 7 assists. So that's something to definitely keep an eye on here. Rubio, Ingles, tournament options only. Jay Crowder, really the only cash game option, I think, from the Utah side of this game. Oklahoma City, obviously I mentioned Russell Westbrook coming off another triple-double. I mentioned 5 in his last 8 games. He's perfectly fine in cash and tournaments. Comes in at 11K on DraftKings, 11.2 on FanDuel. Very appealing price tag for Russell Westbrook. We do like taking point guards that can drive and hit mid-range shots against Utah. 33% of his shots come in the paint or the mid-range. Utah allowing opponents to shoot 43% in those areas this season. He's fine in cash and tournaments. Paul George, fine in cash, takes 36% of his shots in the mid-range or the paint. It's just fine. It's not a spot where I don't really care to attack too much of this game. You can use Steven Adams in cash. Utah has really struggled against big men this season. Again, just fine in cash. This game is just not that appealing tonight. There's so many better places to go. Looking at Orlando and Dallas, one of those better places to go. Dallas, 5.5 point favorites in this game. 211.5 over under. Looking at the injuries, Dennis Smith Jr. is out. Maxi Kleber is questionable. Dirk is not going to suit up here, and Vucevic is probable for this game. Vucevic averaging 24.4 points on 12.1 rebounds over the last 7 games. Terrence Ross connecting on 40% from three-point range on the season, has averaged 17 points per game in his last 4 games. Jalen Brunson has gotten some more playing time with Dennis Smith Jr. out, 13.5 points per game. No, that's what Dennis Smith Jr. is averaging. Sorry, Jalen Brunson is averaging 12.2 points on 12 of 18 shooting from the field over his last 2 games. With Dennis Smith Jr. out, J.J. Barea 1.23 fantasy points per minute, 29.5% usage rate. DeAndre Jordan 18% usage rate, 1.21 fantasy points per minute. Luka 26% usage rate, 1.08 fantasy points per minute. Harrison Barnes, 29% usage rate, 0.99 fantasy points per minute. Jalen Brunson, 17.8% usage rate, 0.73 fantasy points per minute. I did notice in my notes something that I needed to take out. But JJ Barea, obviously, again, leads the team in usage and per minute production. Isn't guaranteed to see more minutes because of Dennis Smith Jr. being out. There have been a couple games where he has gotten more minutes. In 4 games without him, though, he is averaging 24.1 fantasy points per game, same as what he's averaging in the 19 minutes with Dennis Smith Jr. on the floor. So he's fine. He comes in at 4,800 on DraftKings, 5,300 on FanDuel. He's perfectly fine in cash and tournaments. Jalen Brunson, I did mention, I do have a lot of interest in Jalen Brunson here, especially if he's going to get the start and play a decent amount of minutes. Last couple of games has been playing more minutes, 25 against New Orleans, 30 against Houston. Jalen Brunson, a pretty solid value option, especially over on FanDuel at 3,800. A great way to get some value in your lineup with upside. Orlando does rank 23rd in defensive efficiency to point guards on the season, so Barea still a really good option, but Jalen Brunson also a very, very good option. 32% of his field goal attempts are three-pointers, where Orlando is allowing point guards to shoot 37% from 3. Again, more of a boost for Brunson. Luka Doncic, perfectly fine in cash and tournaments, going to handle the ball a significant amount. Wesley Matthews on DraftKings, 4,600, just way too cheap, I think, for the production that he can put up. He does have a 23% usage rate without Dennis Smith Jr. on the floor. Wesley Matthews in the spot, just a really, really, really good spot for him. Should play 30-plus minutes. Again, I mentioned that Orlando really struggling to defend the three-point line this season. Wesley Matthews, 50% of his shots are three-pointers. Orlando giving up 36% on above the break three. So Wesley Matthews in a great spot here tonight. Barnes is fine in cash and tournaments. More of a cash game play, I think, but does obviously get some more usage without Dennis Smith Jr. on the floor. He's really cheap on FanDuel, 5,800, one of the few occasions where someone is better priced on FanDuel. But he is someone that I do have a decent amount of interest in as well. 6,500 on DraftKings, still really, really solid. Coming off some bad games, but not great matchups in some of those games, but still playing a lot of minutes, and that's very appealing. Orlando does rank 15th in defensive efficiency to centers on the season, which is not appealing, but DeAndre and his 3.2% usage boost and averaging 35 fantasy points per game without Dennis Smith Jr. is very appealing. It is a good spot for him. 7,500 on DraftKings, 7K on FanDuel. A very, very solid cash and tournament center option tonight. Looking at the other side of this game, Vucevic in tournaments is completely fine. Obviously, we need to monitor the news. That ankle injury could flare up on him today, so we need to make sure that he's going to be good to go. Would be definitely overlooked here. 8,600 on DraftKings, 8,700 on FanDuel. Leads the team in usage, 26.5%. Takes 33% of his shots at the rim. Dallas is allowing 66% shooting at the rim on the season. He's perfectly fine in tournaments. Dallas giving up 38% shooting on above the break threes. That accounts for 43% of Ross's field goal attempts and 36% of Evan Fournier's field goal attempts. Fournier second on the team in usage at 23.4%. Ross, 22.3%, third on the team in usage. Evan Fournier, 5,200 on DraftKings, 5,800 on FanDuel, a great cash and tournament option. Terrence Ross, 4,800 on DraftKings, a great cash option. 5,500 on FanDuel, a great cash option. I mentioned Terrence Ross has been playing really well recently. Both of these guys, perfectly fine options here. Aaron Gordon's going to be a fade for me tonight. I just don't want to go there. And DJ Augustine is perfectly fine in cash. Going to speed things up by skipping most of this next game. We have Denver at Memphis. Denver 2.5-point favorites, 198.5 over under. Going to need to take a drink for this injury report. All right. Paul Millsap is out. Gary Harris is out. Will Barton is out. Chandler Parsons is out. Dylan Brooks is out. Jamal Murray is questionable. Mike Conley is probable. Joakim Noah, probable. Juancho Hernan-Gomez has recorded 2 straight double-doubles after having just one through his first 23 games this season. I don't have a lot of interest in a game with a 198.5 over-under. 2 really strong defenses going at it tonight. You can use Conley and Gasol in tournaments. Conley struggled a bit of late, but he's also battling some injuries. Gasol has struggled a little bit of late. I think there's a lot of really, really good spots to look tonight, so I'm not going to force a bunch of exposure to this game. Temple is a very solid value option. Kyle Anderson coming in at 4,200 on DraftKings is also a very, very solid value option. Denver's perimeter defense not as strong without Gary Harris in the lineup. Again, I just don't want to force a ton of exposure to this game tonight. On the Denver side of things, this is where I would get my exposure, especially if Jamal Murray is out. Obviously, the odds of the game staying close decreases if Jamal Murray does not play. Without Harris, Millsap, and Barton, Jokic does own an impressive 33.1 usage rate and averages 1.74 fantasy points per minute. Obviously, it is an atrocious matchup. Last time these teams faced off, Jokic took one shot, and he missed that one shot. But he would be an interesting option if you're looking to attack this game in tournaments. There are a couple spots where I do actually feel comfortable going. Trey Lyles continues to be a guy that just produces a ton in the limited minutes he generally plays, but now that he's going to see 30-plus minutes per night without Paul Millsap, he is very, very appealing. Memphis allowing opposing power forwards to shoot 45% from the floor. He shot 2 of 13 against Atlanta, still managed 28 fantasy points. Trey Lyles at 3,700. Gonna be someone that I'm probably going to be building my lineups around. Trey Lyles at 5,600 on FanDuel. Probably not someone that I have any interest in. You can look at Beasley, Torrey Craig, Monte Morris, guys that would get guys that are already going to see increased minutes because the team is shorthanded, but would get even more minutes if Jamal Murray misses. They're guys that you can sprinkle in your lineups, especially over on like FanDuel, where you can drop their score if they don't produce, but again, not really great spots for him. And then Hernan-Gomez is fine in tournaments, but again, not really a great spot for him. Moving on, Clippers at Phoenix. We're almost done, just 3 games to go. Clippers, 11-point favorites in this game, 220 over under. Devin Booker is out. Warren is questionable, but expected to play, but questionable, but might be on a minutes limit, but he's expected to play, but he's also questionable. Luke Richard Mbamute is out. Jerome Robinson is out, and DeAndre Ayton is questionable. The Clippers have been struggling a little bit recently, especially Tobias Harris and Danilo Gallinari, who have shot just 8 of 25 from the floor in the last 2 games. Lou Williams has slumped 8 of 24 from the floor in his last 2 games. This is a get-right spot for them. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a guy that I do have a decent amount of interest in, hasn't really been seeing the minutes that I would like, but he does face a Phoenix team that ranks 24th in defensive efficiency to point guards. Phoenix allowing 66.1% shooting at the rim. SGA is taking 39% of his shots at the rim. I do love him in cash in tournaments at just $5K, although I do expect this game to probably be a blowout, but he should still see upwards of 28 to 30 minutes, assuming it's not like a 60-point blowout at the half. But it very well could be. Um, Avery Bradley is fine in cash on like FanDuel and DraftKings. Playing 30 plus minutes can get some extra steals against a team that turns the ball over a shit ton. Um, it's fine. 43% of Tobias' shots come in the mid range, where Phoenix is allowing 45% shooting. He's fine in tournaments, fine in cash. Gallinari's fine in tournaments. I just don't want to I don't want to force a ton of exposure to this game. I don't like trying to predict blowouts or building lineups around blowouts, but you can avoid this game and still be okay. Like Montrezl Harrell should absolutely feast in the spots. Phoenix really struggles against big men. They struggle against the roll man. He's fine in cash at 6,700 across the industry, fine in tournaments across the industry. And then Lou Williams is pretty much fine in all formats. There's just really not a lot to talk about. Like, if they fit your lineup, use them. If they don't force it. That's all it comes down to. From the Phoenix side of this game, Richaun Holmes is the most interesting guy, I think. And that's absolutely crazy. But Richaun Holmes coming in at 4K on DraftKings. He is, let's see, what is he over on FanDuel? Let me pull up Phoenix. I should just eliminate Phoenix from my projections. Do everyone a favor. 4,500 on FanDuel. Less appealing, but still something that we can look at. We know he puts up a ton of fantasy points whenever he gets the minutes. He's going to play 15 to 17 minutes most nights, and then in blowouts, he's going to get a few extra minutes. Clippers getting destroyed by big men. They rank 24th in defensive efficiency to centers. They're giving up 47 rebounds and 51.4 points in the paint. I do really like him as a value option. Just someone that I do feel pretty confident that he's going to get a little bit of extra run and can really, really crush his salary. It's fine. Like, if he's most likely going to have one of these games where he plays like 22, 23 minutes and puts up like upper 20s in fantasy points. Did this Clippers game last time out, 28.5 fantasy points, had 10 points, 4 rebounds, 6 blocks and steals combined in 17 minutes. That's insane. But he's fine as a value option, I think. Warren's back tonight, but going to be limited. That's going to shorten the rotation for Bridges, Jackson, Ariza. None of those guys is very, very appealing here. Jackson would be the guy that I would use in cash games. Still has a 30% usage rate without Booker on the floor. Bridges is an interesting value on DraftKings at 3,800. Clippers have really struggled against big men, but DeAndre Ayton, 6,300 on DraftKings, 6,600. Not really an intriguing price tag. I think there's better ways to go tonight. Still a good tournament option, though. Melton, I think, is fine in tournaments. He's the better per minute producer than Elie Okobo. But judging, both these guys are going to like split the minutes, and then maybe Juwan Evans gets in there. Who knows? But DeAnthony Melton, I think, is a fine tournament option. And I guess if you're playing like one of the late slates, he would be one of the guys that I would build around if you're playing the 2-game slate where it's like the Clippers and Phoenix and like Miami and Lakers or something like that. I don't remember. Or it's Memphis, Denver. It's Memphis, Denver, and Clippers, Phoenix. So yeah, that would be a slate that I would be fading. But moving on, Minnesota at Golden State Warriors. Golden State favored by 10.5 in this one. 226 over under. Robert Covington is he's probable for this game. He was probable last game and ruled out. Stephen Curry has averaged 30.7 points over the last 3 wins for Golden State. Karl-Anthony Towns shooting 46% from the floor on the road, 50.6% at home. The status of Covington is really, really, really important to this game. I would be shocked if he doesn't play, but it's the Timberwolves. It's Tom Thibodeau. Who knows? He's fine in cash and tournaments if he plays. 6K on DraftKings, 6,900 on FanDuel. It's a pretty good spot for him. We know he's going to play a ton of minutes if he plays. Even if he's injured, he's still going to play a ton of minutes. Karl-Anthony Towns is fine in tournaments. Again, not really a spot where I really want to look tonight. There's just better places to go, like 9,200 for Towns or 9,800 for Embiid. 9,900 for Towns on FanDuel or like 10-4 for Embiid. I'm going to go Embiid. That's all it comes down to. Jeff Teague, though, is a good cash option, I think, especially on DraftKings at 5,900. 27% of his shots come at the rim. Golden State allowing 66.5% shooting at the rim. Obviously, with Draymond Green coming back, that you expect that to improve. That may not happen tonight. We'll have to wait and see. But Wiggins and Rose are interesting in tournaments. Wiggins actually had a really solid game against Golden State the last time these teams played. 22 points in 36 minutes, shot 9 of 23 from the floor. He's 5,900 on DraftKings. That's a pretty appealing tournament price tag. Again, not someone that I would be building around, but if he fit your lineups, I wouldn't say no to him in that spot. Looking at the Golden State side of things, I normally don't take point guards against the Wolves because Robert Covington has just done a fantastic job shutting down opposing point guards. I don't know that he's going to spend a ton of time on Steph tonight if he plays, given that they also have Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant. But also, Golden State just switches everything so frequently. Like, I don't think it's going to be that big of a problem. I do like Stephen Curry, as I mentioned, averaging like 30.7 points over the past 3 wins for Golden State. 9,900 on DraftKings, 9,200 on FanDuel. Projects to be a pretty solid play if you take a look over the projections. 44 fantasy points, 41 on FanDuel. Obviously, gets a little bit of a boost because of the 3-pointers. Kevin Durant, obviously a fantastic option in all formats. Opposing small forwards have absolutely torched the Wolves since November 10th, whenever the trade happened. But so far in the season, 27th in defensive efficiency allowed, allowing 22.7 points on 45% shooting and 40% from 3. I do love Kevin Durant as a great option tonight. 10-1 on DraftKings, 10-3 on FanDuel. Really solid spot for him coming off a really bad game. Draymond Green slated to come back and without a minutes limit. Really attractive in this spot. The Wolves giving up the 7th most fantasy points per game to power forwards. We know that Draymond Green can fill up the stat sheet across the board. 7K on DraftKings, 6,700 on FanDuel. Very appealing spot, especially in tournaments over on FanDuel, where the blocks and steals actually count for more. I really like him as a GPP option on FanDuel. Klay is fine in tournaments. And then Kevon Looney, I do expect a couple less minutes with Draymond Green coming back, but I still think he's going to play a decent amount of minutes, and this is a really good spot for Kevon Looney, so I think he can be used in all formats tonight as well. Looking at the last game of the night, Miami at Lakers. Lakers 6-point favorites, 218 over under. Need another drink for this injury report. Too bad it's just water. Dion Waiters is out for this game. Josh Richardson is questionable for this game. Hassan Whiteside out for this game. Tyler Johnson questionable. Wayne Ellington probable. Rajon Rondo out. Brandon Ingram out. Michael Beasley out. Narrative streets all over this game. LeBron and Wade facing each other for the last time before Dwayne Wade retires. Dwayne Wade, I think, is like 7 3-pointers away from 500. Obviously, it's a revenge game for LeBron James. So yeah, lots and lots of narratives. Wade actually looked really good against the Clippers. 25 points in like 32 minutes in that game. Obviously, that was an injury-shortened Clippers team who only had like 8 players available, and then Tyler Johnson went down with an injury. So we're going to need to, basically, we're going to be waiting on injury news. Hopefully it all comes before lock so we can adjust. But Dragic being back, but also being on a minutes limit does kind of hurt his upside. But Dragic is really appealing at 6K on DraftKings. Let me pull up his FanDuel salary here. Goran Dragic, 5,800 on FanDuel. Pretty appealing in this spot. Does get a pretty decent usage boost with all of these guys off the floor. Let me pull up his usage. Without Whiteside on the floor, Goran Dragic, 28.4% usage rate, 1.19 fantasy points per minute. So that's pretty appealing in this spot. So without Whiteside being on the floor, obviously Bam Adebayo, who has been absolutely stellar in the last 2 games without Whiteside, going to be a core option for me. Had some foul trouble against the Clippers. That was really concerning. Tilted the crap out of me because he had like no fantasy points in the first half, and then he comes out in the second half and puts up 14 and 8. Bam Adebayo 1.11 fantasy points per minute without Whiteside, and without Whiteside on the floor. That does kind of increase actually if you take Richardson and Johnson out, but even so, Bam Adebayo, a core option for me tonight against the Lakers team, who is just really, really bad against centers. They're 27th in defensive efficiency. Dwayne Wade, a high usage option off the bench, 29.3% usage rate, 1.10 fantasy points per minute. Obviously, with Wayne Ellington being back, that could eat into Wade's minutes a little bit, but if Tyler Johnson misses or Josh Richardson misses, that changes things. So again, we're going to need to wait and see. I still like Wade. I mean, it's a narrative game. I do actually expect this to be one of those narrative games where Wade actually does try pretty darn hard. I like him in all formats right now, but would be someone that I would be building around if injury news shakes out the way that we definitely want. 5,800 on DraftKings. He is 6,100 on FanDuel, fine in cash in tournaments right now. Josh Richardson would be in play if he is able to suit up. But again, we're just going to need to wait on news. Rodney McGruder, a guy that probably won't get talked about, played 40 minutes against the Clippers. I do expect this to be a spot where he does play a ton of minutes, especially if the rotation is shortened by more injuries. Rodney McGruder at 4,200 on DraftKings, 4,500 on FanDuel. Pretty darn appealing here. Kelly Olynyk would be in play as well. He's someone that I do have interest in right now at 5,300 on DraftKings, 5,500 on FanDuel. Has just been playing extremely well recently. Not shooting very well, but rebounding, getting you some assists and some blocks. Kelly Olynyk is perfectly fine in all formats. Again, would see more of a boost if more people are out. So would James Johnson, who actually had a really, really solid game against the Clippers. He would be someone else to consider in the spots should the injury news shake out again. I'll have more on that in Discord whenever we get further updates. On the Lakers side of thing, without Ingram and Rondo on the floor, LeBron James, 36.4% usage rate, 1.62 fantasy points per minute. LeBron James, again, narrative street, former team facing Wade for the last time. Double narrative, always finding cash in tournaments. Went bananas against the Heat the last time these teams played. Had like 50 plus points, 51 real points, 73 fantasy points. LeBron James perfectly fine in cash in tournaments. Lonzo Ball is interesting. Miami has struggled against point guards at times this season. He's cheap. He's 5,200 on DraftKings, 6,500 on FanDuel, so more of a DraftKings specific play. Averages 0.95 fantasy points per minute without Ingram and Rondo on the floor. His minutes are more secure, especially now that Beasley is also out. I do like Lonzo Ball a significant amount here tonight. Not a great matchup for Kyle Kuzma, but 25.3% usage rate without Rondo and Ingram on the floor. Kyle Kuzma, 20 plus points and 40 plus fantasy points in 5 straight outings. Really, really solid. Has been shooting really well. I like Kyle Kuzma a lot tonight. 7,200 on DraftKings, 7,500 on FanDuel. And then you can look at Josh Hart and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I would lean towards KCP actually in the spots for a little bit of a discount, but that's going to do it for the entire slate, all 11 games. Good luck in all your contests tonight. I will be back on Wednesday for another 11 game slate.